안녕하십니까? 한 아세안
Welcome back to the ASEAN Republic of Korea Logistics Think and Biz Forum. We will now begin Business Session 3. Business Session 3 will be on the response strategies of leading global logistics companies amid COVID-19. We're seeing increased demand for logistics, and we're ushering in digitalization because of COVID-19. So we're seeing a major change in the logistics industry and environment. We would like to talk about the response strategies at this session.
이번 세션도 마찬가지로 두 분의 발표를
As we did in session 2, we have two presentations, and then we will be inviting the speakers and panelists to engage in a panel discussion and a Q&A session. Simultaneous interpretation is being provided. Korean is channel 1 and English is channel 2. Speakers have 15 to 17 minutes.
감사하겠습니다. 그러면 세 세션의
Let us now invite the first speaker of session 3. Professor Park Ho-chul is our first speaker. Let me invite him onto the stage.
교수님을
Professor Park Ho-chul of Korea Maritime and Ocean University was in charge of global marketing at Busan Port Authority until August of this year, and now he's at the university nurturing talents. He'll be talking about the connectivity between ports and logistics. Professor Park, you have the floor. A big round of applause, please.
Thank you for the introduction. My name is Park Ho-chul from Korea Maritime and Ocean University. In this current time of COVID-19 pandemic, what is happening in the area of logistics? I'll briefly touch upon that and talk about how the Busan port is responding to this situation. These are the main points that I'd like to touch upon. First, this is an image of an empty terminal used by cruise ship passengers, and they were heavily impacted, as you can see. For several months, this was how the terminal looked like. They were seriously affected by the pandemic. In 2020, the number of cruise calls at Busan Port was 0. On the far right-hand side, you will see what it says only 8 technical calls. That means they either called in the port to get supply for their workers or just to refuel their vessel. Other than that, the real calls were not made in Busan. I looked at the total volume of containers at Busan port. The transshipment is a very important part of the cargo handled in Busan. As you can see, there was a 5% negative downturn in imports. But then in 2020, despite the pandemic, there was a 3% increase. In 2020, it is as expected. In the container part, the vessel calls was reduced by 6.6%. Then, in the beginning of the pandemic, IMF and World Bank warned that the shipping industry would be heavily affected, and they warned the carriers of revenue losses. As a result, the carriers responded by the strategy of blank sailing. Because of these warnings, people were very pessimistic, but you see that the trend actually was in reverse. This is the monthly import containers throughput in USA. In 2021, this starts from June 2020, and you can see starting from that point, the U.S. has started to come out of the pandemic situation, and the overall volume is increasing steadily. This is the situation in North America, and it shows that the ocean freight rates has increased. We've been talking about this for some time, and it's being discussed by many because this was unexpected. There was a certain sudden increase in freight rates. This is a very busy slide. However, globally, the key word is the bottleneck in the global supply chain. Basically, what caused this? I'm sure that a lot of people, a lot of experts made accurate predictions, but the things that are happening in the ports was basically congestion and bottlenecks. The bottleneck was most severe in North America. Why did this happen? This had a cascading effect and spread throughout all the ports in the world. Especially most ports in North America experienced this sort of bottleneck. I think that there are two explanations. One is that because there was a decrease in the number of port workers as a result of COVID-19, and also because of the large amount of financial support that the U.S. government is handing out, a lot of these port hands have not returned to work. At the same time, freight and cargo is increasing at an unprecedented pace. This led to a situation where the port system wasn't able to catch up with the demand. This data, the data that I have, shows that once you go into a U.S. port, you have to wait at least a week.
전 세계 글로벌 해운 산업의 이 선복의 약 16%를
And 16%
통계를 주장을 한 바가 있습니다.
of the cargo volume was taken away
해상 운임의 급등 이런 점을 설명해 줄 수 있는 이런 게 되겠죠, 그죠?
due to the sudden rise in the freight rate. This is the Busan port in April this year. The yard utilization rate in Busan port is indicated as 77.4% here, but I believe it's slightly higher in reality, slightly above 80%.
그럼 이게 뭐 부산항이 이게 이제 운영에 문제가 있을 때 되느냐 이건 아니고요.
Does this mean that there's some problems in the way the port operates? No. Actually, if you look at GPS, Busan port has a very good location. It's just that these delays had a domino effect, and as a result, Busan port was also affected by the bottlenecks elsewhere. This is a decrease in carrier schedule reliability. On the right-hand bottom, you will see the line indicating 2020, and the schedule reliability dropped. Less than 40% of the carriers were able to meet their schedule.
이건 역시 이제 그렇다면
Then what about Shanghai?
상해에서 LA 롱비치 또는 상해에서 로텔담까지의
From Shanghai to Long Beach, California, or Rotterdam, there are departures, and the departure schedule shows a very low reliability. Headed for LA Long Beach and headed for Rotterdam, we see that
스케줄을 지키지 못한다.
about 90% wasn't able to meet their schedule. No further explanation is required.
상체에 소금을 뿌린다 이렇게
Here, I use the term adding salt to the injury. which means that the very important trade line in Asia and Europe was blocked due to these accidents. On the right-hand side, you see the Yantan port, which was closed for about a week due to the COVID-19. These important ports
이 상황을 악화시키는 이런 현상들이 있었죠.
had to close down, and it exacerbated the situation. This is the global financial crisis in 2009, and I compared that with the present. Unlike what you might expect, GDP dropped substantially, but the container traffic
우리 financial crisis, 리먼
did not decrease as much as it did during the Lehman crisis. So it's doing quite better than during the 2009 global financial crisis.
현상들이 벌어지게 됐습니다. 결국은 이것은 뭐냐면
What does this mean? First, I think there was a demand surge, and the government stimulus package was one of the reasons behind that.
저기
Therefore, the main driver of demand surge came from the American side. E-commerce or inventory systems used to be just-in-time based, but now they're going towards ample inventory because they want to be prepared for any potential shutdowns. That's why
이런 영향도
they are importing more cargo than what is actually required, just to be sure that they are prepared for any future lockdowns. So I talked about the circumstances during the COVID-19, and I think I need to speed up a little to finish up on time. This is Busan Port. The left-hand side is the Busan New Port, and the right-hand side is the Busan North Port, or the old port. This is the current status of Busan Port. It is the second busiest transshipment port in the world, following Singapore. Busan is the seventh busiest port in the world, and it handles a large amount of containers.
2020년 기준 약 2,900만 T
Based on 2020 figures, 29.1 million TEU worth of cargo was handled at Busan. This is the Busan port throughput in recent 5 years. Busan port has a strategy
환적 화물을 증가해서
of increasing transshipment volume to become a logistic hub of Northeast Asia. For the Busan port, they are concentrating all their efforts on transshipments. Then, even transshipments of all about 15 million TEU, 65% are transshipments. Then why is Busan Port so competitive as a transshipment port? The geographical location, the connectivity with other ports, and many services provided by Busan Port makes it competitive. This is Busan Port's connectivity with overseas ports. I looked at the data a while ago, and according to UNCTAD's data released, the indicator of connectivity shows that Busan used to be third last year, but it dropped a notch this year.
가장 결정적인 이유
The decisive factor behind Busan's status as a transshipment port was because that it was a large port close to America, and the fact that it is located between China and Japan. So it becomes a very important connecting point between the two major countries.
현황이었고요.
I've talked about the current status of Busan Port until now. I'll just skip over the cruise part. I believe that from 2021, cruise ships will start to call on Busan Port. If you look at the capacity, Busan has a large enough capacity for cruise ships to berth.
사실상 핵심이 디지털라이제이션 뭐 이런
The key topic is digitalization today, and of the large ports, Busan is a little bit lagging compared to other ports, but recently they have been speeding up their effort in the digitalization of the port operations. Chain Portal is a third-generation system. In the beginning, we had Port Miss or BPA Net, but now it's gone to Chain Portal. Chain Portal
만의 플레이어들이
needs to have all the port players cooperate in order for it to produce results. Professor Che talked about the importance of collaboration and sharing. Even the ports have to become smart and increase connectivity based on
리소스의 어떤
the resource sharing between port players.
또 우리 글로벌리 보자면 지금 큰 화두가
In the global perspective, we have the decarbonization taking place between the BCOs. And in order to improve the air quality, Busan Port is undergoing great change as well. On the left-hand side, you see that
작년 9월부터
from September last year, Busan Port was designated as an ECA, emission control area.
ECA로
IMO has limited the SAX emission to 0.5%, but Busan limited the sulfur limit to 0.1%. And the speed reduction zone was designated for vessels to slow down.
검열을 시키고 있는
A lot of incentive is being given so that this project is carried out.
개선을 위한
As a result, many initiatives to improve the air quality in Busan Port is being taken. This cannot be avoided, and many of the Busan Port players need to feel that they are responsible for this.
두 가지
These are two cases that I brought as a Green Port project. Recycling resources
태양광이라든지
is very important. Furthermore, solar energy or thermal energy are leveraged to enhance energy efficiency. And these are some of the cases,
마지막 같은데
case studies showing that effort. Busan also has become a member of Smart Port.
부산 항만공사에 근무할 때 우리
When I was working at the Busan Port Authority,
있는 것처럼
as shipping companies have shipping alliances, the ports also have what they call a chain port, and that is an alliance of ports. I think it was about 7 years ago that I went to Hamburg and took part in the founding ceremony. At that time, the leader of the Smart Port was Hamburg of Europe. At the time, the founding members consisted of Felix Stone, Hamburg, Antwerp in Europe, and in Busan, Shenzhen, Singapore from Asia, and LA from the US. So 7 ports formed this alliance called Chain Port and embarked upon the effort to make the ports smarter. This is the digital twin project in Busan Port. I think very soon the vessel booking system,
난관이
VBS, will be implemented.
항만의 효율성이라든지
When Busan Port becomes more efficient and becomes smart, it also will become socially responsible. That means it is upon them to make sure the port is operated more efficiently.
거기 있죠. 우리 이제 배후단지 이게 이제 스마트 공동 물류
And there is a hinterland where the logistics hub exists behind Busan Port. I believe that Kifa is also very interested in this project. BPA conducted this project over an area of 120,000 pyong. This is the last
세 가지
project that I want to talk about in Busan. There is the Busan Newport expansion project, and secondly, there is developing the free trade zone park nearby Busan. And the final project is the North Port redevelopment project. Number 1 and number 2 are projects that the logistics professionals need to be interested in. The Busan Newport has to be expanded continuously, and I say this everywhere I go. If you look back, if the new port had expanded as planned, then in the midst of the current global supply chain chaos, we would have been in a very favorable position.
빨간 그 네모칸에 있는 것처럼
As you can see in the red box,
건설 계획이에요.
this was the plan to construct the second new port. I believe that it is still going forward, but the government has to implement the policy of continuously expanding the new port. Why? Because Busan has the necessary resources and assets to become a leading transshipment port. And we have to leverage that. This is the free trade zone that I was talking about. The red part is currently under construction, and the blue part is under planning. This shows what sort of activities are taking place in the district park and what are the benefits as well as requirements. This is how the port will look after redevelopment. I was able to finish in 20 minutes exactly. I initially thought that I would need about 40 minutes to deliver my presentation, and actually it's the first time that I've given this presentation in 20 minutes. Anyhow, I managed to do so. I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
기업이나 또는
I ask you for your continued interest, and I wish you the very best of health and success in your business and in your homes. Thank you very much.
네, 고맙습니다. 박호철
Thank you very much, Professor Park Ho-chul. He gave us a presentation on the development strategy as well as the current status of Busan Port. You can see that Busan is truly a compelling and beautiful city. In this fastly changing logistics environment, he mentioned that we need to proactively respond. So we would like to give you all the support to Busan and the Republic of Korea. Let us now move on to the next presentation. CEO Nam Young-soo of Value Link will be giving the presentation. The title of his presentation is Strategy in Response to Changes in the Logistics Environment Post-COVID-19. Please come up on the stage.
지금부터 발표 시작합니다.
Thank you. A big round of applause, please.
안녕하십니까. 방금
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. As introduced, I am Nam Young-soo from Value Link.
발표드릴 자료는
At today's ASEAN-ROK Logistics Think and Biz Forum, I want to talk about the strategies in response to COVID-19 in the logistics environment. And let me just give you a brief introduction of Value Link. We are a digital tech and platform-based international logistics company, and I think that is why I was invited as a speaker for this session.
두 가지 챕터로 해가지고 말씀을
I have two parts to my presentation. First is why we have to change, and second is how we need to change. So let me talk about these two parts.
현재로 살고 계시는 분들한테 너무 친숙한 언어들
For those of you that live the modern times, I'm sure all of these words come quite familiar to you. E-commerce, transformation, COVID-19, and climate change, ESG, lockdown, lockouts, global supply chain,
그다음에 커머스에 대한 부분
and commerce, untact, on-tact. So this is a world cloud that indicates all of the factors that change and that impact the logistics industry.
그동안 성장해왔던
Due to the pandemic, we've been seeing an explosive growth in the already fastly growing e-commerce market. And with the growth in the e-commerce industry, you can see that there were many digital transformation skills and technology being launched in the market to support e-commerce. So the pandemic, e-commerce, and digital transformation, it seems irrelevant, but all of a sudden we see an interlinkage amongst these three words. Now, let me talk a little bit more about the pandemic.
2020년에 시작이 돼가지고
It started in 2020 and it's still ongoing.
이후라고 했는데
As mentioned, the title of my presentation is Post-COVID, but I don't know if it's going to be post-COVID, after COVID, or with COVID, or whether we're going to see another new infectious disease outbreak.
7번
This slide indicates a total of 8 pandemic cases in Korea, 7 for the world, and you can see that it's gaining in frequency. If we include the MERS pandemic, it was just every 6 years where the pandemic is severely impacting the world. COVID-19 is recorded to have led to 4.55 million deaths. Well, that was as of early November, and I probably think that we have more deaths right now. So then, will the pandemic disappear after COVID-19? No, not really. We believe that there will be additional variants. And because of the pandemic, it's true that the downstream industries are being greatly impacted. If we look at the industries, we have manufacturing, distribution, as well as trade. I'm sure you've all heard of DEF, coal, semiconductor, batteries,
지금은 좀 잊혀진 일들이지만 불화수소
and also hydrogen fluoride and rare earth are all some critical factors that impact our logistics industry, and you can often see them in the news reports. A global shutdown takes place, and because of the limitations to transport, we see lockdowns as well as lockouts.
세계대전이 2차례 걸칠 수 있어요.
We had 2 world wars, but if you look at shipping and air transport, even World War II could not stop that. However, pandemic did just that. It hindered all movements. Commodities weren't delivered to the households as necessary, and now we're talking about the unmanned system and digitalization. And I think that the pandemic has led to such changes and impact. So as you can see, we've decided to go from the untact and to the untact to the on-tact world. In other words, we're moving on to the online platform. So these are some of the social structural changes that were resulted from the pandemic. You can see that we're transitioning into a life of the online world. For the consumer, we are seeing more online activities, so shopping takes place online, entertainment also enjoyed online. So that is how entertainment is being consumed. And it's the same case for healthcare. It's being done online, education also online. So this is a transition that we're seeing not only in Korea, but around the world. What about companies? Work from home is something that's being done. The smart workplace is also a new concept that was introduced into the workplace. So it's not about going on group business trips or group meetings. Even without that, decision making is possible and work can be performed.
팩토리 역시
And what about the factories? We're seeing an expansion of smart factories leading to more unmanned facilities as well as automation.
우리 모든 사람들이 쇼핑
As a result, our everyday life has significantly changed from shopping, work, education, travel, finance, leisure, and even marketing and sales. But there is an issue here, which is logistics. As for the other industries, the switch to online was possible. However, logistics have to do with the physical movement and transport of cargo. So in the process of moving on to online, this is probably the bottleneck or the hindrance. Logistics, in other words, was the linchpin in this process. So then let us now move on to e-commerce and how that has impacted the logistics industry.
코로나 이전에
Pre-COVID,
20% 전반대
e-commerce was around 20%, and last year it jumped to 35%, and it was number 1 if you look at Korea. Until then, it was China, but with Amazon, many people think that e-commerce percentage would be very high in the US, but it was just in the early teens. And last year, it surpassed 20% for the first time. The e-commerce market in itself is around 106 trillion. So you can see that it accounts for about 35%, meaning that the remaining 65% is still offline. However, we can say that the pace of growth is rapidly increasing. And another area of e-commerce is the direct purchase or reverse direct purchase, which we call CBEC or cross-border e-commerce. It is growing to 1 trillion. In other words, a CAGR of 27.3%. We can say that e-commerce is a new service, and there are many responses that are also emerging in the process. For instance, you can see that there are different service categories in offline commerce and online commerce. In the case of offline commerce, we call this B2B, and we have the sellers, the manufacturers, where they would sell to the middlemen, to the distributors. So when it's door to door, you can see that there is a distribution center in the middle. There is a DC in the middle where the sellers would be selling to or delivering to the DCs. And then the distributors will take in the cargo, and what they do is utilizing their internal network will be allocating the cargo to their respective stores. And the consumers will go to the retail store to purchase. So there was no thing as a last mile service. However, with e-commerce, this has changed. So from the point of import, it comes into the fulfillment centers and the last mile to the consumers, and even the case of overseas selling, we do see reverse overseas purchase, and now the seller will be in charge of this total chain. That's what it's like for e-commerce. So what happens is in the process of import, it's in the form of ULD or container boxes, and then it's switched to boxes and pallets, and then after the fulfillment center, it's in individual parcels or packs, and that's how it's serviced to the consumers. So you can see that the logistics service coverage is expanding, and because of these changes in the downstream industries, the logistics only naturally will have to respond to the changes of this environment. So what I can say is that it wasn't the proactive will of the logistics industry. Because the downstream industry is changing, it was only natural that logistics needed to respond. So let me now go into how we are responding, particularly some cases of Korean countries. And I would also like to talk about what kind of digital services ValueLink is offering to the companies to overcome these challenges and changes. Because we're seeing a disruption in the global supply chain, we are seeing a reorganization of the chain. And it's true that this pace has been accelerated due to COVID-19, but already we were seeing a restructuring of the chain with offshoring. The areas of Japan and Taiwan were where we saw offshoring, and then it went through Korea to China, and now if we look at the producers, China has the greatest impact, but China as well saw increased labor costs. So what happened was they relocated to Southeast Asian countries, and Vietnam, Malaysia, and Indonesia were the most sought out manufacturing outlets. And due to this disruption of the global supply chain, we're seeing an acceleration of another wave of relocation. So key strategic items or materials or sanitation materials were not being manufactured abroad, but rather onshoring, nearshoring, or having it localized was something that we saw in the Americas as well as in East Europe. So then what kind of impact did that have on the cargo volume? This is on the cargo volume of the first half. From 1985 to 35 years afterwards, these were the top 10 ports. Ever since the 80s, the global top 10 ports always included a Japanese port or a Taiwanese port. But in the year 2000s, we've been seeing these ports replaced by Chinese ports. And then in 2010 and onwards, no Japan, no Taiwan, and all of the areas you see here are those in China. So out of these top 10 ports, you can see that 8 are Chinese ports.
변화의 포인트로 제가
And I also wanted to pinpoint Hong Kong. As you know, in terms of air transport, it's critical, and also in marine transport before the opening of China. It was a critical port, but you can see that the ranking is going down because large ships. What happens is they don't call in these ports because of the enlarged size of the ships. So with the change in supply chain and change in production outlets, the hub and scope strategy will have to adjust to that, and we need to respond accordingly.
2020년, 21년
In 2020 and 2021, in the top 25, we saw many Southeast Asian ports. Malaysia was already in the top 25, but we also saw Vietnam, Thailand, Indonesia, and Sri Lanka joining the top 25.
이 나라에서 생산량이
This means that we're seeing more production volumes in these countries, and we believe that these changes are to increase in the future. So how shall we respond to these changes?
물류 서비스는 쫓아가야 되는.
It's only natural that logistics services will follow where cargo will be concentrated. So I think that this is an inevitable trend. Next, moving on to e-commerce. I've mentioned about the fulfillment service that is being offered for e-commerce. This is not something special in marine transport and in air transport and also in multimodal transport and also for railroads and in-road transport. It's just another service category. So this is what we call fulfillment. And e-commerce, on the e-commerce platform, we have units of products and goods where the picking, packing, and the last mile service is being offered to the consumers. In the case of the fulfillment services in Korea, consists of 90% imported goods. And who is in charge of the imports? Forwarders or 3PL companies are in charge. And once it goes in the fulfillment center, the fulfillment service provider, well, until recently, there were SME startups that engaged in fulfillment services, but now we're seeing parcel delivery service providers providing fulfillment services. So you can see that they deliver the last mile or it's sold abroad. And the route itself is much longer than in the past because in the past, it was that for sellers to warehouse into the DCs, and then it was logistics from that point on. But right now, what you see here is logistics is now covering the entire chain. So we now see a longer chain. And who can offer these services? Well, there is hardly any provider that can do that. The fulfillment center to the consumer, there is a time delay. It's not like it's bought or sold all at once. And the container box or the pallets will have to be separately delivered in parcels. So this structure is quite different from what was done by the freight forwarders. So the freight forwarders would be in charge of the warehousing into the fulfillment centers, and the logistics service providers will have to take care of the rest. And in order to dominate this market, what's happening is, well, the freight forwarders, they cannot go into that fulfillment service domain. But you can see that the fulfillment centers are actually inching into the freight forwarding market for international transport and logistics. And you can see here the numbers. The number of products in a container box is 20,000. And for the fulfillment centers, they have to deal and handle with 20,000 data points. This indicates to certain concerns. In other words, it's about information management. Logistics, they call this SCM. Just like the global supply chain, there is a supply chain for logistics.
전 멘추호 교수님이 말씀을 하실 때
And as was mentioned, Supply chain is a movement of capital, product, and information. That was how it was indicated by other speakers. But many people would think that SCM is only about the movement of cargo. However, once again, here you can see that there is a major movement of capital as well as information. E-commerce means accumulated data, and you see millions of data points moving around and being transmitted around. And this has led to a major hurdle, and for companies that understand this information wave can actually enter into this logistics market. Moving on to the evolution of logistics. There are changes to the needs of consumers, and logistics services companies are also evolving. They started to introduce systems, and they're also offering tracking services, and the fulfillment last mile services are also something that have added to their portfolio. And the smart factory and the smart logistics center is something that's being built by these providers. Unmanned vehicles, cloud service, robots, all of these areas are something that you can see from the services provider. But you can see that this is all efforts to enhance efficiency or internal efficiency. But what I want to say is that there is a major elongated supply chain between the consignor and the logistics company. But in between, there is so much information in between, and we need some way to communicate that information. In the past, we responded offline. However, now we also have to look into an online response. We need a joint response into the future, and I think that that is a desirable way forward for logistics companies. And we've been seeing the companies take action. So you can see here there are multiple phases in the chain, including transport, storing, loading, unloading, packing, and ICT. And we also see smart workplace, RPA, AI, cloud, blockchain, and big data. These fundamental services are being used to manage the supply chain. So we're starting to see some bits and pieces of change amongst the providers. Digital technology is needed for logistic services. So RPA, AI, and smart workplace enables us to enhance the efficiency of logistic services. And I would like to give you an example of Value Link on how this is possible. Platform is now a critical element, and many people would think of a commercial platform when we say platform, but the commercial platform is at the very bottom. It's just a transactional platform, so it's not that sophisticated. However, there is an overarching platform, which is the SCM operation platform. And it's important to make sure that there's an interaction between the two. And for that to be possible, we need a data platform. And it's operated on the cloud, and AI and RPA technologies are embedded. And real-time information or AI's data will be fed into the system. In addition to that, we have blockchain as well as IoT data and analytics data, and we're connecting this with our partners. In the past, logistics was about consigners utilizing multiple counterparties, and it was the same case for forwarders. So it was quite complex, and it had many levels to it. But right now, all of the partners will connect to this platform and will put in their order, will get their quotes, engage in transport, settlement, performance management. All of that is possible under this single platform. And in this platform, we have 8 trading types. And with regard to digital transition, all of the technologies are linked to this platform. And the service provider's OS is also connected to this platform. And platform is offering this, and Value Link is offering this platform service. But I want to say that Value Link connects all of the players of the ecosystem and enable them to engage in a win-win. We're not skewed towards a particular party, and this platform is provided free of charge. Transactions are free of charge, data is free, technology also offered free of charge. And why are we doing that? Well, we believe that only when we connect the supply chain, we can gain that global prowess. So we're seeing this in the logistics industry, and we want to be the initiator in Korea. So it's not about gaining margins from the transaction. It's about rendering back to the market. And I think that more of such platforms will spring up in the future. And we also have cargo tracking. So the cargo to truck, to ships, to airport, to planes. We utilize these analysis and tracking system, and we engage in performance management, and we seek improvements. Not only that, it's based on AI to offer optimized routes. A automatic order system is also offered, and in order to interface with this data, we utilize blockchain, and e-documentation services also being provided. So all of this is free of charge.
애프터 코로나, 위드 코로나 시대.
So in the post-COVID or the with COVID era, these developments took place to help logistics service providers. In the future, it's about catering to the clients. That's indicated in the Forever a Day One book. And what we also need to do is put together a win-win strategy. And once we do that, I think we can be successful in this era of change. Thank you for your attention.
네, 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
Thank you very much. Mr. Nam Yong-soo talked about the post-corona response by the logistics industry. Why do we need to change? How do we need to change? Were the question posed and answers. Here, connectivity and collaboration are the key words. This forum is where we are talking about collaboration. Now, I would like to invite the presenters and discussants on stage for a discussion and Q&A session. This is the last session of the day and an opportunity to summarize what has been discussed throughout the day. Please, I'd like to ask the speakers and discussants to take seats on stage. We have as discussants Professor Park Ho-chul from Korea Maritime and Ocean University, the CEO of ValueLink, Mr. Nam Yong-soo, the director Jung Chung-ha from Samyang Express, and Executive Director Shin Yun-sun from COSPO Shipping. We have discussants who will be joining us online, and Professor Park Ho-chul will be moderating the discussion. The floor is yours. Please proceed until 48 minutes past 4 p.m. I don't think we have much time left. We have two discussants participating online, and I will just want to check if the audio is working and if you can see us all. Thank you. Today we were able to talk about how we responded to the unexpected pandemic and how this brought about unexpected change in our lives. Most of all, sometimes we had to separate it from our loving family members and watch colleagues as they suffered in the hospitals. Even economically, there was a great impact. For instance, the global supply chain suffered from bottlenecks, and this caused great difficulty among many companies. In some respect, this event showed us how important logistics and the flow of goods were in this world, and it realized what a large part it took up in our lives. We don't have much time, but let us hear the comments from the two discussants on what was presented. And if we can provide us with insights, I think this will be all worth our time. Mr. Nam Yong-soo from ValueLink and I made the presentations. I'd like to introduce the two other discussants. Jung Chung-ha, Mr. Jung Chung-ha from Samyang Express. Can you say hello? And Mr. Shin Yun-sun from COSPO Shipping. It's good to meet you. Because of your name, I thought that perhaps you were a female, and I wondered what you would look like. But now, after meeting you, I see that you're a gentleman. No, I'm actually feminine in many respects.
정청화 이사님께 먼저
I'd like to ask the first discussant, Mr. Chung Chong-ha, what you thought of the two presentations. Were there anything that came to your mind as you listened to the presentations? I took a look at your
다른 하실 말씀
prepared text, and it just consisted of questions, but I wondered if you have any other comments to add.
저는 방금 박호철 교수님으로부터
Yes, I am Chung Chong-ha, director at Samyang Express. Thank you very much for the presentation.
발표를 보고
I listened to the presentations, and I did have some questions for the speakers.
실무적으로 좀 질문을 드리도록.
So let me give you some questions as a practitioner in this industry. So first for Professor Park.
소위 이제
Due to this logistics crisis in 2021, consignors are having many difficulties and experiencing many difficulties. So how do you anticipate this crisis in 2022? Will it be the same as 2021? So for the cargo owners or consignors or forwarders or ship owners, what should they do? How should they respond? And what should the government do in this process? And with regard to the Busan port development, I did read through your presentation materials. And my take on that, especially on the smart ports, is the following. I know that smart ports will become the mainstream. But due to smart ports, we may be losing jobs. And not only that, only certain investors may be profiting from the smart ports. So that's one concern that I have. So I'd like to ask for your take on that comment. And thank you, Mr. Nam, for your presentation. I can see that with COVID-19, the platform business and e-commerce will be the mainstream. But there wasn't a lot of information on the traditional import-export businesses in the post-COVID world. You've also talked about tracking cargo real time, basically. And I know that there are certain countries or regions where there is no ICT network. So can you track cargo in these remote areas as well? And my third question, with regard to the platforms on import and export cargo, will it grow into Coupang and Amazon or B2C platforms going forward? So I would like to ask these questions to Mr. Nam. Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. Let me first respond to your question.
The global supply chain disruption and chaos is so much talked about, so I'm sure everybody understands this. But I think that the logistics chaos has two elements. One, it affects the manufacturing sector. And the second, it affects the logistics sector. The manufacturing sector, I'm sure you know that it's due to closing factories and plants due to the COVID-19 and the problems in production due to the shortage of workers. In Malaysia and Vietnam, for instance, the COVID-19 is widespread. And is also one of the base countries of the global supply chain. Then, when will the logistics disruption end in the manufacturing sector? I think this is something that the WHO Secretary General can answer when the pandemic is totally gone. And then when everything normalizes, I think that the logistics disruption will end in the manufacturing sector. In the case of next year, I believe many countries will shift their policy to living with the pandemic. Therefore, I think that by 2022, many things will become a return back to normal. But in the logistics sector, it's about shipping
구분을 해야 된다고 생각을 합니다.
and a port. In the shipping sector, all of the shipping companies are concentrating all their efforts into resolving this issue. So if the circumstances improve, I think the pandemic will end. Well, the disruption caused by the pandemic will be over by next year. But we
제가 볼 때는 이 아마
expressed this as a logistics chaos, but I think the real problem is with ports, and in particular the ports in North America.
세미나에서도 보니까 북미 지역의 대부분의 항만들이
I found out at a recent seminar that most of the ports in North America can't really handle the current load. Why is this happening in North American ports? That's due to the shortage of workers and because workers are leaving the ports. I also think it's because North American ports are unable to handle a sudden increase in cargo volume, which was unexpected. The facilities that they have right now is not enough to handle this surge in cargo volume. The North American ports are very much challenged right now, but there's also a cascading effect that has spread throughout other ports in the world.
이분이 굉장히 열심히 하는 분이세요. 그래서
I know that I personally know the person in charge of logistics in LA port, and I know that he is doing his very best to deal with the situation. But the important thing is that the demand is surging in the ports. All the consumer goods, the volume of consumer goods that have to be handled by port is not decreasing as expected. And perhaps another peak will come. Anyhow, a lot of lessons have been learned, and I'm sure some sort of breakthrough will take place next year. Therefore, even in the logistics sector, I believe the second half of 2022 will see the end of the supply chain disruption or logistics chaos. You said that all the gain could concentrate in certain stakeholders. I don't think that's necessarily so, because right now, during the pandemic, we are experiencing the same thing, but the hot topic among ports is decarbonization due to climate change. That is coupled with security, and another hot topic is safety. Furthermore, the vessels are becoming larger and larger, which means we can expect a decrease in the workforce with the advent of smart port, but it is a trend that will stay for us for a long time. I hope that we can all be mindful of that and be well prepared for the coming trend. I hope I answered your question. Yes, thank you. Would Mr. Nam Young-soo add to that?
Let me make myself brief. You've talked about the forecast for 2022. So in the case of the forwarding business, you probably need more. I think that there isn't much of an issue in businesses, and I think that the bottlenecks will not be resolved. Most of that is concentrated right now in marine transport, so these bottlenecks are to stay with us for air transport, and based on SCI, I think that it will be not below 1,000 points, but probably the minimum line will be the 2,000 points level. So if we consider all of the existing bottlenecks, we will be seeing a market not centered on consigners, but for logistics companies, which would be of benefit for consigners,
예전과 같이 EDI
or excuse me, for logistics companies.
사실은 글로벌리 한
If we look at cargo, only 60% is currently EDI is currently being used. EDI is only used for 60% of the cases. Now it's about utilizing AI. It's not about getting and receiving the signals and transmitting the signals, and that's why it's possible for various regions. But in the case of IoT, it's not universal right now. So via AIS, we can track the location of the vessels, and for us, we every 10 minutes it can control the location of 420,000 vessels. So it's easy to track ships, but IoT is something that you need to embed onto the object. So this is something that needs a better penetration in the future. And in the case of the platform, I mentioned that it's not just about the commercial platform, but we do not have a platform player that's expanded into the operation layer. Maersk has something similar, and DHL's Agrita and Senker and Kuinlak are just some of the examples where they have an operation platform. But for Korea, we only have commercial platform, so it's very transactional. And such platforms, I do not believe, are scalable, and probably overseas players are bound to dominate the market. And transport intelligence, in 2023, they say that 20% will be online transactions. And if you look at Maersk, about 25% of the volume is taken in via the online platform. So considering that, in Korea, we believe we will be seeing more online orders coming in, and these online platforms will be taking in the orders. And we
민호가 되지 않을까.
believe that the winners will be platforms that provide a diversified services to logistics providers. Thank you. So, Director Chung, I hope that that answered your question. Yes, thank you very much. And are there any comments that you would like to add? Samyang Express, as far as I know,
한국의 대표적인
is a flagship provider of 3PL, and due to the pandemic situation, I wonder, were you impacted in any way? Or do you have any marketing tools that you've established or developed to make that next leap forward in the post-pandemic world? Anything that you would like to add?
As of now, we don't have anything special going on, but looking at the market situation right now, due to the freight rate and a lot of things that we're experiencing for the first time, we need to collect more information. And based on that information, we are planning to prepare for 2022. I'd like to now ask Mr. Shin to make his comments. Can you see us well? Yes. Yes. Professor Park and Director Nam, it is good to meet you. I was part of the ship crew for 5 years, and I've been working at the Cosmo Shipping from 2010. We specialize in consolidating air freight from Station 1. I've been listening into this forum from Session 1. There aren't many things that were said that is directly linked with our business. Basically, we're talking about the response necessary in the pandemic, but I'd like to focus my talk on the air cargo. I don't have much time left, but it's maybe a little bit fortunate for me because I'm not a very good talker. Anyhow, in the macro sense, we are related to the topic. And I was very impressed with the presentations made. Of course, there are political and economic factors behind the Busan port. And if the Kadok Airport is newly constructed. Do you expect any synergy effect between the new Kadok Airport and Busan Port? If so, as an air cargo specialist, I would be very interested. If you don't expect any synergy, I would be disappointed. But anything you said today would be very helpful in my future studies. Furthermore, I'd like to ask Mr. Director Nam that I already sent the materials beforehand. And I realized that I really don't have enough knowledge to go into the discussion in depth. But regarding the freight forwarding, I am a specialist. We specialize in consolidating. We're an expert consolidator, and we're number one in terms of total tonnage of cargo that we handle. Number one in air cargo is not that visible in Korea because in terms of tonnage, air cargo only accounts for 0.3 to 0.5% of total cargo. Of course, in the invoice, the value is high, so it might account for about 10% in value. But after the pandemic, we
해운으로 운송이 안 된 물량이 항공으로 도는 그런 모달 시프트 때문에
were affected by the modal shift. In other words, a lot of ocean cargo was shifted to air cargo, and that worked for us. I think a lot of shipping companies that had SC contracts also benefited from the situation, and we were the same. I don't have an in-depth knowledge about platforms, but from what I see in our industry, there is no company that is not creating a platform. But what's the impact of the platform? Is it platform just for the sake of platform? Or is it a substantial platform that can accommodate the big data? All of the forwarders are building their own platforms. The large corporations in Korea in logistics all have their platforms. But from what I see, it looks like they're taking their platform and trying to bring in others into it, like high-end shipping or transportation. So I don't know if I can use the expression vendors or partners, but anyhow, there's a risk of these partners becoming subordinated to this large corporation via the platform. Professor Park talked about the ports in LA and North America that were suddenly overloaded with cargo from last year. This is a little bit different from that, but last year there was disruption in Korean ports, not because of the cargo volume, but because of the system and the lack of workers. We don't have workers to work during the pandemic, and that centered on forwarders. Since we didn't have those workers moving about, platform and online, everything just broke down. Theoretically, under the COVID-19 pandemic, online operations should develop significantly. But in actuality, since people or the forwards were not moving, in the end, even if the U.S. president tried to take a lead, nothing was resolved. It is going to be resolved only after a year or two. Online definitely needs a significant role played by the participants and players. And that is the role that the freight forwarders like us need to assume. Air cargo changed after the pandemic, and it's mostly about this. In shipping, charter, and SC markets were quite active. It's still doing well until now. But in air cargo, those areas are not that significant and not fully developed. I think Shanghai and Hong Kong is ahead in these areas. But after the COVID-19 outbreak, Charter, BSA, or block space agreement is something that we're looking into. One of the things that we are doing right now is looking at the fact that cargo planes go to LA in large numbers, and this is a new area of business
다시 활성화되기
because the passenger
스페이스가
planes reduced. So afterwards, we believe that the SC companies, shipping companies, will be more aggressive because this is an issue that emerged in the air cargo market. Will this remain the same in the post-pandemic age? I think the trend of space becoming forming into blocks will accelerate.
항공화물 입장에서
From air cargo person's point of view, these are the changes that I observe. I'm willing to answer any questions regarding air cargo.
Thank you very much for your comments. When it comes to sea and air cargo, there are many changes, and thank you very much for pinpointing the changes that we're witnessing right now. So this wasn't a question for Mr. Nam, was it?
사실은
Well, with regard to the platform, I'm sorry, but I'm a layperson on platforms, but you did mention that you offer platform services free of charge. But if it's a company, we are all profit-driven. However, providing such complex systems free of charge, well, for us, we tried to develop such a system, but it was very difficult to do so. But to provide that expertise free of charge, what is your profit model in this process?
예, 전문의.
Thank you very much for that question. And thank you for the comments on air cargo. I know that air cargo, you don't see a lot of platform there, and it was an agent-based business. So there is a difference between sea cargo and air cargo. At any rate, we need to minimize the imbalance in information, and we're seeing these efforts being made in the market. So this is a major trend. And mentioned that we're providing free of charge platform services, and the reason why we decided to do that forever is that's the only way for all parties to take part, and only then can we have the supply chain connected. So that is why we wanted to offer a platform for all free of charge, and to have that complete the supply chain with everyone involved. So data and transactions in the process, and in the process of technology transfer, there may be specific revenues that may be reaped from that. And there are certain platforms that they do that. That is their revenue model. But for us, that is not our business. We think that that is not business, but rather a service that we offer to our clients. So then what is our profit model? Well, once we have all of the chains connected, we can use that chain, and there are more services that we can offer with that connected chain. So we're preparing to launch such services. It's been 4 years since our foundation, and for the past 3 years, we focused on developing the platform and inducing participation of partners. And because there is no transaction cost for them, it gives them a great opportunity to do their business. So we have more partners on board. And for us, we think that we can launch e-commerce logistics services in the process. On a daily basis, there are service orders, which includes imports, exports, fulfillment, and last mile. And if we include reverse overseas purchase and overseas purchase, all of this information is provided via the platform. And if we do see 100,000, 200,000 orders from these individual companies, it's not something that can be processed manually. So we need a system to do that. And in the platform, we have partners where we can actually share the volume with them, and they can offer the services. So that is the e-commerce logistics service that we are offering. And we call this ICF. That's integrated cross-border transportation. So it's about integrating international logistics and fulfillment, and it includes transport, customs clearance, fulfillment, last mile, inland transport, and also refund of tariffs. So everything is done one stop.
원하는 플랫폼
So for any sellers, resellers, or e-commerce players, manufacturers can actually use this service. And the reason why this service is possible is because we have a platform and because we have sellers and buyers on board.
다른 모델로 이용하는
So you can see that we are also using the platform as a user, and we use this and base off our business on this platform. So offering this platform free of charge will be no issue for us. Yes, so then I would like to ask one more question. So in this platform, you mentioned about the services that are being provided, but in your presentation, I think you briefly mentioned that you are neutral in the process. So then, all of the participants on the platform,
하셨을 때
if you think that this profit model works, what happens to the participants? Sometimes, would they trust in you, in the fact that you'll be neutral in the business transactions? Were there any resistance in the process? Well, out of the service participants, we have companies that have trillions of revenue, and the reason why they can come on board is because the rates to the partners is just open, it's disclosed. So this is the rates are opened on an open book basis, and that's how it's invoiced in the future. So what happens is for the forwarders, in terms of the communication charge, in terms of maintenance costs, there is a separate commission that is added to the invoicing. But for what we do, we just open up the seller's rates. It's an open book base, and we receive the service charge from the consigners. There is a pre-contracted open service charge, and we take that charge, that service charge, as a profit. So for our logistics partners, we are a disclosed, transparent sales channel where they can sell their volumes at the price set forth.
파주 기업은 그걸 통해
So consigners can save costs. Logistics partners, they can go through us, where of course it's not one country, one company, but it seems as if it's one big country, one big platform, and they can utilize us as a sales channel, and we can benefit from that. So what we want to do is expand our services globally. DHL and FedEx and these other companies have their own network, and they gain their competitiveness in the process. But what we want to do is utilize this connected network to win the competition. So this is our platform model. So we use the platform, but within the platform, you can see that it's a win-win model. There is no sacrifices made on part of any other partner. That is our profit model. Thank you.
I hope we can go into more detail if we have future opportunity to talk again. You are welcome
코스모 쪽에 그런
to come and talk with us any time. I've been hearing about the great performance of Cosmos for a long time. I will also look forward to future opportunities to discuss that. Listening to what you said, I feel that you two need to meet for the sake of developing the logistic industry in Korea, shipping industry, and I've been working in the forwarding or shipping industry as well, but I think that it's the first time that we have collected these different professionals at one place. So I think we need further opportunities like this. Now we have arrived at the end of our schedule, and I have some final words to say before I close. Because of the pandemic, the global supply chain is disrupted, and Korean exporters are having a very difficult time securing shipping companies, and many people are undergoing great difficulties. During this pandemic, we've been forced to think, is this a singularity or is this the new normal?
말들을 하고 있습니다.
People are asking this question, and we need to think about this seriously. And I think in some ways we need to accept this as the new normal, at least in our industry. And for those of us discussing about global logistics, we need more wisdom and new ideas. We need to pool our wisdom to make sure that we can level up our industry based on hard thinking. I hope it becomes an opportunity for that. This is the last session. I thank you for staying on until the very end. Mr. Chung and Mr. Shun, it's too bad that we weren't able to meet face to face, but you gave us some valuable contribution. Thank you very much.
더 이상 코멘트가 없으면은
If you have no further comments, shall I close the session? Yes, that's good. Fine.
오늘 마지막 오후 늦게까지
Thank you very much for staying with us until the late time in the afternoon.
이 코로나 시대에 우리를 지켜주는 것은
I think that it's love and smile that guards us during the age of pandemic. Along with that, solidarity also keeps us safe. It makes us stronger and makes us better.
어쨌든 우리가 서로 지금까지 살펴보지 못한 점이 있다면 더욱더 관심을 가지고
So we need to take care of each other, be more supporting to each other, and have more discussions like this. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
정말 수고 많으셨습니다.
Thank you very much. Speakers, discussants, thank you so much for your contributions. As we are moving towards smart logistics, we talked about ways to respond and also about how we can engage in a win-win. Thank you for that wisdom. And also, we were able to listen to the experts on how we can become a sound logistics power. And also next year, the Fiat World Congress 2022 will take place, and I think that these discussions will contribute to the World Congress. I will see you all at Busan at the Fiat World Congress 2022. Thank you very much for joining us online and offline. And thank you to all of our participants. I'm Kim Hana. Thank you.